listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber.
And my name is Jamal Thomas. Let's get ready to go against the grain. So today we'll be discussing all things Super Tuesday without equivocation, hedge, or attempts to spin it. Last night was an amazing night for one comeback kid, Joe Biden. There have been lots of F-bombs dropped at this office this morning, but we're going to get into what went on in Super Tuesday. Pursuant to this conversation, we have several guests that were on the ground in Texas and Virginia that we'll be talking to a bit later. But first, it is imperative that I start here. This is a dark day. This is a dark, dark day. Without a doubt, Joe Biden had a dominant night on Super Tuesday. The race, fair enough, is certainly not over, but there are thousands of delegates remaining. But the plan of the Democratic Party to stifle and to kneecap, meaning working together in order to stop Sanders and blunt his momentum, was undoubtedly a success. Let's listen to the rhetoric coming out of the campaigns in the wake of Super Tuesday.
Just a few days ago, the press and the pundits had declared the campaign dead. And then came South Carolina, and they had something to say about it. And we're told, well, when it got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy.
And when we began this race for the presidency, everybody said it couldn't be done. But tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we're going to win the Democratic nomination.
So here's my advice. Cast a vote that will make you proud. Cast a vote from your heart. And vote for the person you think will make the best president of the United States of America.
You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics. What we need is a new politics that brings working class people into our political movement, which brings young people into our political movement.
Winning means uniting America, not sowing seeds of division and anger and hate. We got to beat Donald Trump, and we will, but we can't become like him. We can't have a never-ending war between the parties.
Yes, that's basically what the campaigns are saying. That's their messaging going forward. If I am being brutally honest, I am apoplectic, vindictive, angry. I wish I was in a breaking room right now where you can throw stuff and break stuff. I'm being honest. There were two big winners last night. Joe Biden, obviously, but also Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren. Now, based on my model of the world, Elizabeth Warren is in this race in order to sop up Sanders, allowing people to exceed the race. Now, that might have not necessarily been all that clear early on, but it certainly should be clear right now. Warren is continuing in this race. Warren put out a press release saying that she has momentum and is moving to the next states coming up next week. Warren did not win a state. She came in third place in her own state. She's using a super PAC in order to keep her in the race in many of these other states. By the way, that super PAC has stopped spending money because why do you need to keep spending money? Mission accomplished. The goal was to stop Sanders in Super Tuesday in order to set the narrative going forward. Mission accomplished. I mean, think about what Warren has said in this race. I want big structural change. I'm an ally of the left. And all of these apologists out there who've been telling you that, oh, she's okay, really, she's a friend, she's an ally, they were wrong. Each and every one of those people who's been backing her, a vote for Warren is effectively a vote for superdelegates. And this person who was supposed to be an ally and friend of the left is actively dinging and sopping away support from the guy that is really the avatar of the left. She is not going to win a state. Put that in perspective. She came in third place in her own state. And she is still running pillar to post. Now, when I made the point that all of the moderates are consolidating and getting out of the race and allowing Biden to be the person, when I made the point that Obama was calling all of these people and Obama's influence was able to pull these people out of the race, that wasn't just the coalition of the moderates. That was also Warren, who was a necessary component to that plan. After all, if Warren wasn't in this race, the majority of her support would have went to Sanders. And if that support went to Sanders, in plenty of these states, Sanders would have been able to win. Texas, Massachusetts being two big ones. But let's be clear, though, we can't necessarily blame Warren for this. Warren is her own person, even if she's working in the context of the Democratic Party. And it should be understood, if your name is Bernie Sanders, that the party was going to work against you, just like they did in 2016. Why would you believe that 2020 is any different? There were ads and articles talking about the anti-Sanders. You had Schumer, and you had Pelosi, you had Pete Buttigieg, all of these people discussing how do we stop Sanders. It was very clear that in the context of party politics, stopping Sanders was the modus operandi. So if your name was Bernie Sanders and you're getting into the race, this notion that these people are your friends is lunacy. It is aggravating to me that Sanders is looking at people who are trying to put a knife in him, who are stabbing him in the back and calling these people my friends. It's ludicrous. They're not your friends. They've been working against you this entire time. But again, the point is not so much to blame Warren here. Yes, it's true that back in 2013, Warren had a secret deal with Clinton where she was going to get deals. This was reported by NBC News and ABC News that she had certain policy concessions in order to throw her support for Clinton. I don't know why that would be different this time around, believing that if mainstream Democratic establishment gets elected, that she will be looked after. But again, you can't languish too much ire on Warren, the culprit. And honestly, the pointedness of my ire is at Bernie Sanders himself. I made the point as recently as yesterday, but I've been making it for months now, that Sanders has a weakness ideologically in going after people and with this notion of a killer instinct. It just doesn't seem to be in him. You have Joe Biden that has three pillars to his support, basically the elderly, the electability argument, and the black vote. And you would think if your name is Bernie Sanders, you need to look for every opportunity that's possible to carve out those numbers from Biden. And that has to go beyond policy. Not everybody goes entirely for policy. Meaning, yes, you might have better policy ideas, but not everybody is voting on policy. There are certain things or areas of combat that you need to be able to have that go beyond the terrain of just these gentlemanly arguments. Sometimes your opponent will take certain measures or say certain things that you would have to be willing to go after him on. And this notion of, oh, I'm ideologically not okay with doing that doesn't pass the muster. You're being given hundreds of millions of dollars to win this race and to be the avatar of all of these people. You have all of these people who need health care, education, Social Security expansion, all of these real big things, these big policy ideas. And you're the avatar of that whale screaming for a political revolution. Do you believe that revolutions are bloodless? Do you believe that you're going to be able to get your revolution without actually stomping some people in or doing things that you don't necessarily, or you're not necessarily comfortable with? Meaning going after your quote-unquote friends who are not your friends at all? Let's be specific. Civil rights. We had this conversation yesterday about Sanders' weakness in talking about issues of civil rights and tying those issues to his policy proposals and how he is going about his particular life, especially in the contrast to somebody like Joe Biden. In the votes yesterday, in the exit totals in Super Tuesday states, Biden won 58-17, the black vote. That's almost a 3 or 4 to 1 difference in the black vote. And again, you can get mad at Joe Biden, but it is Sanders' responsibility to clarify and make it clear that Joe Biden is lying. And in occasion after occasion after occasion, when he should have been going completely to the hilt to get that black vote and to carve that black vote out of Joe Biden, he never did it. Joe Biden at one point claimed he was part of the civil rights movement. Let's hear him talk about this.
During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
Now, that's Joe Biden honestly admitting, no, I wasn't part of the civil rights movement. I was involved in the way that people are involved by thinking about it. That's the honest reality of it. But let's listen to Biden going from one black church after the next, looking one black person in the face and saying this.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact.
That's not a fact. You just heard the original video that Joe Biden said he wasn't part of the civil rights movement, followed by the video where Joe Biden said he was. He was going to church after church after church, lying to people for that. And again, not content to just use the black people here as props and lying to them in one church after the next. He then makes up the case that he got arrested in South Africa trying to see Nelson Mandela, and ups the ante and the ridiculousness of this, that Nelson Mandela even talked to him and thanked him for getting arrested on his behalf. This is utter ludicrous. If your name is Bernie Sanders and you have Joe Biden on the debate stage and you know that he's been out there saying this, he's been out there lying about this, how do you not say anything about this? And how can you blame Joe Biden for lying if your candidate is not necessarily going to make it clear that Joe Biden is lying? This matters. Think about Social Security. When the issue came up with Social Security and in Iowa, they found out Biden was lying. He collapsed. When they found out that Warren was lying about Medicare for all, she collapsed. Lying is a big deal, meaning even if you had this notion of the Obama rub that's on Joe Biden, I will tell you this, African Americans, large swaths of them, will not be okay with Joe Biden lying about the civil rights movement. And if your name is Bernie Sanders, that is the video you need to play to get those votes. Where is your killer instinct? Does this stuff matter to you or not? Is your ideology that much important over getting real material things done for your constituents? Sanders was asked on a debate stage explicitly about Joe Biden and the black community. Listen to what he says.
Senator Sanders, several weeks ago, Nina Turner, one of your national co-chairs, published an op-ed piece that said Vice President Biden has, quote, repeatedly betrayed black voters to side with Republican lawmakers and undermine our progress. Senator Sanders, do you agree with her, one of your most visible surrogates, that Vice President Biden has repeatedly betrayed black voters?
Well, I think what Senator Turner was talking about are some of the early actions of Vice President Biden, but no. Joe Biden is a friend of mine, and I'm not here to attack him.
Then what are you here for? Then what are you here for? Joe Biden is out there lying about being part of the civil rights movement, conning one black person after the next to vote for him, thinking that he's some kind of friend of African Americans. You could have brought up Social Security and the number of African Americans that rely on Social Security. You could have brought up the crime bill. Yes, you voted for it, but there was a great difference in tenor in the way that you guys were talking about it. You could even brought up Joe Biden running out in the daylight with racists in order to put black bodies in prison, or for that matter, this crack cocaine disparity, or busing. Meaning there are a litany of issues that Joe Biden was not working to the benefit of African Americans on. Even the bankruptcy bill. Yes, these things affect everybody, but these things affect the people at the bottom of the income economic scale the most. Don't be mad at Biden for doing what he's supposed to be doing, which is winning the election. Don't be mad at the Democratic Party when you knew the party was going to cheat your guy. Be mad at your candidate for not trying to maximize his potential to win, as opposed to caring entirely about his ideological base. Yes, I'm angry at this. Yes, I'm pissed off at this, because I strongly believe that Sanders, if he would have maximized his potential, could have cut into South Carolina, and this notion of the bump that Joe Biden got from South Carolina would have been minimized. What do you think, Bob? Am I being too hard on Sanders on this?
Yeah, I'm nervous because I know you want to be in a break-thing room to say what I'm about to say, because I don't want to get broken here by you. I think Sanders supporters have as much to be angry at themselves about as they have to be angry at Sanders.
Explain.
And I think there's because I think, look, the issues you're talking about were the same issues people that left his campaign in 2016 said if he does not address these issues, he's going to face the same problems come 2020. If he does not figure out how to reach into the black community, if he does not figure out how to go on the attack properly, and if he doesn't figure out how to either leave the Democratic Party, but if he just walks back into the Democratic Party, think everything's fixed, that he's going to run into these same problems. So I hear where your frustration lies, but where was this frustration? And I don't know you 4 years ago, was the frustration that you just expressed now there 4 years ago, and you and others that are angry at him today, if you were there 4 years ago and said, sure, run again for president, but unless we figure these things out. And I think that's why it's a small percentage of people that really aggressively left Sanders and went to Warren, but that have been saying the same thing you are saying now for a good year plus now, that we're saying this guy needs to figure these things out, and he's not doing it. And so, yes, ultimately, I think the candidate carries quite a bit of the weight to blame. But at the same time, if there's too many people that have said, hey, nothing wrong here, everything's great, it's all about the DNC, it's all about the establishment, that's the focus of our problem, as opposed to the candidate and what he's not able to do to address the issues that he's now running into, which I think a lot of people that, and this, I don't necessarily agree with where people are with Warren at this point and sticking with her, but a lot of them have simply said, no, Jamal, we identified that same frustration with him. We went and tried to meet with Sanders. Sanders and his team said pretty much, nope, we're good. We're not going to address those. They've said that for a few years now. So, I mean, that's kind of like, how do you reconcile that person right now? And what was the onerous on Sanders supporters?
In 2016.
Some of them tried to. A lot of staff members. I know the African-American outreach director for Bernie Sanders who left and tried to do a debrief with him and his team and said, look, there's ways to avoid these things. I know you didn't want to go to the South. You didn't want to go to HBCUs. You know, you don't want to compete. You felt awkward and uncomfortable. You don't want to bring up the civil rights stuff, all of that. You must do this.
And his campaign, to do that.
And his campaign simply said, no, we're good. And not enough other people got behind and angry like you're angry today 4 years ago and said, no, we too also agree. And unless you address this, we're not going to ride with you. And I think too many people gave him a pass off of the DNC, rigged it. That was enough of it. Nothing wrong with you, Mr. Sanders. You're perfect. And I think that's what kind of is coming back to bite a lot of people.
I've been talking about his weakness for at least 4 months.
4 months. I'm talking about 4 years. 4 months ago, it's too late. He's already in. He's already raised the money. He's already got the team. He's already bought a lot of people.
4 years ago, there's no way to know that. I mean, you're
after
saying
the campaign
no.
4 years ago, people said you have an issue in the black community with doing outreach and going at the throat of people and saying, look, these people are not your fans.
Well, those are different. I mean, going after the throat of somebody. And even my argument here about the black vote, it has everything to do with him being more aggressive, less the black vote, meaning you're getting the black vote by being aggressive. You're still talking about policy and everything else. I don't have an issue with Sanders in the sense of policy. My only issue for the last year has been dealing with this notion of this killer instinct. He just doesn't seem to have it. And this ability...
Does your killer instinct not include going after black... I mean, what the killer instinct of going after your opponents is one thing, but going into areas and going in there and saying, look, I don't feel comfortable, but I'm going to win you. That's part of that killer instinct of going into those communities that you haven't won in the past and saying, I don't care what any of the haters in here are saying. I don't care what my internal mechanisms are saying. I'm going to go in here and win because I'm the best person for these people. And he simply said, look, I don't know if I can win over... I feel he said, I can't win over these voters. Let's not worry about it. Let's stick to this issue
when
over
did he
here.
Say
That's
that?
Where we're
Wait. When did he say that?
In his actions. What you're saying.
No,
he hasn't gone in and targeted.
But he said that he couldn't win over those voters. I'm not
saying he said that out loud. I'm saying by his spending, by who he's hired, by where he's gone with his campaign, he has acknowledged I'm not going to win this because he hasn't competed. By not competing in certain areas, you're saying I can't win there. And I'm saying the killer instinct
but
would say
I'm competing in those areas.
He's not competing. How did he compete the other day?
No,
Alabama, Arkansas,
what I mean by that,
or
he
in
is
South
going
Carolina.
into those states. The difference is there's a difference between if he's going to South Carolina or going to these states to compete. He is going to those states to compete. He went to South Carolina. He was talking about HBCUs. And as you said earlier today, Sanders does talk about black issues. You were out there when you said it.
I said it,
So he does talk about those issues. He did go into those states, but that's a difference between going to states and trying to get a particular vote and a killer instinct. Those are just different. I mean, he will make his pitch to him. This is entirely ideological. And he would make this pitch like a particular socialist, and he would say, I care about policy. And he's trying to win people over with the argument of policy. Now, I look at that, and for the last year, I've been like, oh, God, that doesn't work like that. Yes, you're going to get some people over, but all fights are not going to be purely policy. My issue with Sanders is not that I don't think his message is or that he tried to get those people. I think he does try to get them. I just don't think he For him, he's dramatically uncomfortable by it. And to me, that's aggravating. And like I said, I don't blame him in 2016 if you're running that race and you're saying, okay, policy and everything else, and that's what you're pushing. And no, I don't blame his voters for that because he was cheated by the DNC. I put all of this on the candidate himself. It is the candidate's responsibility to realize that there are things that I want to accomplish in the world and to be able to get over themselves in order to make that argument. But that's different than him trying to get those voters. You're assuming that he believes that he can't get them. I don't make that assumption.
I don't think either of us know that for sure because we're not in the head of Bernie Sanders. I'm saying there's been plenty of people that had the critiques you're critiquing him with today 4 years ago after the 2016 campaign and said, let's fix it. Bernie Sanders said, no, I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to do what I can. Now you're complaining or upset or angry at Bernie Sanders.
That? I'm not going to do that.
No, basically what you're saying, the killer instinct and going after older black voters.
I'm trying to make a distinction between what you think versus what you know. And right now,
but you don't know these things either of what was happening in these rooms and talking about it afterwards. Neither of us were in those rooms.
I know, but you're making the point that Sanders didn't think he could get those votes. You don't know that. He did think he could get those votes, which is why he was in South Carolina trying to get them. I'm making the point that there is a difference between his mindset in trying to get those votes where he's using policy versus what you're thinking of. He just doesn't think he can get those votes. I don't buy that he didn't think he can get them. He was clearly moving up in the black vote. The catch is he got crushed in the South.
Right.
He
and I'm saying there was
there
was people that ran his campaign in the South in 2016 and sat with him afterwards and said, here is a winning strategy of what you can do to better or differently engage those voters.
Right.
He said, no, I'm good. I'm going to continue on the path that I'm on. And he got crushed. Yes, I've talked to people that are part of that campaign staff.
Just so we can
go back and listen to African-American staffers, sat with them afterwards and said, look, we need to do a debrief and you need to rethink the strategy of what happened in the South.
And he says,
they all left and they all went and supported Elizabeth Warren.
And he says, I'm good.
You can look at the delegates for Elizabeth Warren that were Bernie delegates.
Let's nail this down. I'm trying to nail down truth.
The truth.
All of the people who were black, who were working with Sanders, went to go for Elizabeth Warren. That's what you're saying?
African-American outreach director for Bernie Sanders. I'm telling you, I'm saying right now, then let me correct what I said.
Yes, please correct it.
The Noah Changas of the world, the delegates, the Marcus Farrells of the world, the Delvon Michaels of the world. Tell me what black strategist that you know that went and talked to him and that he changed his strategy and did well in South Carolina and won.
Well, let me say this. There are some of those people.
But say who those are, because you're saying I can't. No, I'm saying all of them and overgeneralize. Who is your person you're pointing to?
You're saying all
I
of the
already
people
just
who
corrected myself. You can't keep on going back after I corrected myself and keep going back to all.
If it's not all.
I'm telling you staffers and delegates. I just named 3 people.
I don't doubt that some people went from Sanders to Warren.
And why did they do that?
Some people went from Sanders to Biden also, like Simone.
Okay, well, she's getting a paycheck. She's not ideologically based on
it. I mean, it's
much
still
different. But you're saying, I'm telling you,
the basic point.
My overall point was, look, you're angry today, and you're pointing out all these things.
Yes.
I'm saying 4 years
ago,
and
I'm blaming them on the candidate.
I'm saying 4 years ago, other people were already ahead of you and said the exact same thing.
Bob, I don't think they're saying
the same thing. Did Bernie Sanders change and do anything different than what made them angry? You're saying you have a different anger at Bernie Sanders than they were angry at Bernie Sanders.
Well, the Noah Changas of the world are very specific in the context of race, meaning Noah Chang, I've seen her. Other people may not know her. Well, you can.
But that's what I'm saying.
You can take it that way.
But
those
and now you're changing the last week and said, look, he should have taken in race and a different factor.
Yes,
so
I do think he should have raised in a different factor. But listen to my monologue. My monologue was very specific to saying he should have impeached Biden's credibility and testimony on the issue of the civil rights movement and raise his own. The people who you're talking about may have a very specific context of looking at things through the lens of race. I know a Noah Changa. I've seen her. She's very particular on this stuff. So I don't give that as a pass per se, just because they have very specific ideas on race. And is Noah Changa backing Warren?
You're saying...
Is she backing Warren? You used her name.
She is backing Warren.
Noah Changa is?
Yes.
Okay.
You're saying...
So if I pull her up now...
You're saying Bernie Sanders should have taken a different strategy.
Yes.
They're saying Bernie Sanders should have taken a different strategy than 2016. Has his strategy changed between 2016 and 2020?
Yes. Is he not getting the Hispanic vote this time around?
That and
is he getting
we're talking
more
about
of the black vote?
We're talking about South Carolina.
You asked me if he changed his strategy, and I'm saying yes, and he has started getting people of color in this race.
And how did it turn out for him yesterday? So I'm saying the strategy
he did lose
took...
the black vote, Bob. But I guess I'm making the point to you, Bob. Yes, he could make an adjustment in his strategy. By definition, he did, because he's getting the Hispanic vote in waves that he wasn't necessarily getting before. Those people who you're talking about, he may not necessarily change it to their liking, but again, to their liking doesn't really mean anything. My point is that if you're going to go after Joe Biden and Joe Biden is going to douse himself in the black vote, then you need to go after him on that very specific issue. And by the way, this is an ideology thing to me, where you attack him, the killer instinct. I mean, look, my issue with the black vote for Biden versus Sanders is that Sanders doesn't impeach Biden's credibility on issues of civil rights. That's on him. Any random person can tell you, hey, you should run your campaign this way. Those people may have a certain philosophical point of view of the world, and I'm saying that is not indicative of how he should have run. I'm being very specific. I guarantee you.
And my
I'm not
initial
saying the
point
exact same thing that Noah or some of these other people
And
are
I'm
saying.
simply saying he needed a different strategy. You're saying he needed a different strategy.
Yes.
If more of Sanders' backers a year, 2, 3 years ago said, look, you need a different strategy, I think that would have helped support and push him to have a different strategy. I don't think enough people were angry enough at Sanders and the lack of better strategy a few years ago that led him into the strategy that he took, and it didn't pay off on Super
But we
Tuesday.
need to be specific about what that strategy is, and that's where the difference is.
Okay.
Because all strategies are not going to be the same. Me saying I think he should have a different strategy is different. I guarantee you, especially if you're using those particular surrogates that didn't necessarily think Sanders was doing enough for blacks.
But your strategy versus they're all hypothetical different strategies that we don't know what happens if they would have gone down these paths. My simple point is a different strategy should have been taken, needed to be taken. We didn't take that strategy. We have the strategy he took, and that's turned out for a bad Super Tuesday.
What's the strategy he took, Bob?
With what regards? The strategy, not a killer
You keep
instinct,
saying
not
the
being
strategy
better.
Well, I'm being specific to killer instinct. You seem to be talking about race.
I'm
Those are
saying
slightly
how he
different.
talked to and took feedback from a large crew of activists and African-American supporters in 2016. His lack of ability to hear that criticism and critique have led him to this situation. He needed to take a strategy where he listened, he was able or willing to hire different people and go and approach the South in a different strategy than he took. That's all I'm saying. The strategy he took, whatever it may be, was not a winning strategy. And so all I know is those people that worked for him in 2016 were gun-ho out there, grassroots activists, organizers across the South.
Yeah.
They simply felt rejected by him and his team when they tried to meet with them after the 2016 election to talk about where Sanders had fallen down, and they didn't want to hear it. Those people went to Elizabeth Warren. I can send you a longer list of the 100 endorsers, Latinx, queer women, black women for Sanders. Those people were with Warren now. Those people were with Sanders in 2016. They felt slighted. I could start naming and listing them. They all felt slighted that he didn't respond. And all you have to do as a candidate is properly respond and sit there at a table and say, yep, let me explain that. Yep, that's great. I hear that. I'll change. And he was not able to do that. That's from people that were in the room with Bernie Sanders.
So why is Warren
reported
losing
that
so
to me.
poorly against people of color?
Because she doesn't have name recognition. She doesn't have the better policies.
Senator of the
there's a
United
difference
States
between
doesn't have
who's your
name recognition.
activist.
Who could have ran in 2015 doesn't have name
Why did
recognition.
Sanders not do better in 2016? It's still a name recognition thing.
Sanders was nobody in 2016. But look, Warren, they had a draft Warren petition in 2015. Hillary Clinton was terrified. I can show you the article in ABC News, terrified that Warren was going to run against her because she thought that Warren would have won. So it's not this thing of nobody knew who Warren was. People did know who Warren was.
Infrastructure. Let's get some calls in here.
Yeah,
we'll get back to arguing with each other. Charles, thank you for calling in all day, every day. Greatly appreciate it. What's happening?
Hey, what's up, man? Well, I do think that was a little bit harsh on Bernie Sanders. I do think, it's the fault. Because I know all of that. I know that Bernie Sanders was part of the civil rights movement and all that. And I'm African-American, so if I can learn that, I'm not special. People could have took the diligence to learn that on their own, and Bernie's a 78-year-old man, and he's doing all of this. He's doing the most as he can do, he's going around the country. He can only do so much.
So, Charles, I partially agree with you. I don't think I'm being too hard on Sanders. And if I'm being honest, I don't even think Bob is being too hard on Sanders. I mean, we're saying something slightly different, but I think it boils down to something very similar. It's just Sanders has a certain ideological point of view of the world where he believes, for whatever reason, just apparently, that he doesn't want to get into these fights, meaning these knife fights on different terrain other than policy. I mean, look at the Nina Turner thing, where you put a knife in Nina Turner and you didn't want to say, yeah, Joe Biden has been bad with blacks. Same thing with Zephyr Teachout. He didn't want to go after her. I mean, he didn't want to back her point up on corruption. And again, Teachout was right. Like in one situation after the next, when he's given the opportunity to try to either clarify or go after his opponent's strong suit, he doesn't do it, and he just put his surrogates out there for it. That's my angst. I mean, and I got to be honest, that's been my angst for the past year. I've done videos over the year pointing out that this is a weakness, and this is going to be a problem for him going forward. I mean, look at Warren for a moment. When Warren was running in the race earlier this year, Warren was able to get up to the number 1 and 2 spot. Why? Because Sanders never created a clarity between who she was versus who he is. So she just came across as looking younger and a female. Great. She didn't collapse. It wasn't anything Sanders did that made Warren collapse. It was what Warren did that made Warren collapse. And that was when she had to explain the healthcare thing. But understand my point. That means that this wasn't necessarily in his hands. He wasn't willing to do what was necessary in order to clarify and create contrast and get that vote. Instead, he waited until she collapsed. That's not a way to win a campaign, especially when you have all of these things on board that you want to get accomplished.
But I wasn't finished making my point before you interjected.
I'm sorry. Go for it.
But what I was trying to say is when you got, the media, and you got people who just can't be swayed that Bernie Sanders is a better candidate for black people. You bring up the crime bill, you bring up and I know on a personal level how hard it is to convince black people about how terrible Joe Biden was for the community in contrast to Bernie Sanders. So it's an uphill task when you're trying to talk to a brick wall. These black people are brick walls, and that you cannot convince them. Like I've been showing them, pictures of Bernie Sanders in the civil rights movement, getting arrested, putting his life on the line. When he could have been like lynched for being an N-word lover back then. Supporting black people when it was real unpopular to do. And I try to contrast that with the crime bill, and I know how personally hard it is to convince those people. I've showed people this, and they still vote for Biden and vote for Bloomberg or whoever, establishment Democrats or whatever. So it's like, I believe no matter how hard you try, y'all underestimating the hard-headedness of these people who you're trying to reach out to. You're really underestimating how hard it is to get a message through to these people. I've tried personally, and they just, for some reason, they buy into the mainstream narratives of establishment Democrats, and they let left.
Yeah, I hear you, Charles. Thank you so much for the call. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to turn to a quick break here before we come back with our favorite guest, Teresa Lundy, and many, many calls on hold there. We see you. We'll come back to you. Just give us a minute after this break. You're listening to Political Misfits live in Washington, D.C. We're back after this.
Breaking news, expert analysis, and exclusive stories, all in one place. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Hi, this is Max Kaiser for Double Down. New show on Sputnik with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert. Everybody's doubling down. Central bankers are doubling down. Gambleholics are doubling down. Everyone's doubling down. Why don't you double down? Right here at Sputnik with a new show called Double Down with Max and Stacey. Bye, y'all.
Shooting from the lip.
We're taking no prisoners here. Real opinions for real people. So where we bring you people with controversial views, and instead of trying to cash them out, we actually let them expand on their views. What's going on in British politics, European politics, and indeed in world politics as well. And wherever you are, whether you're a UKIP supporter, a Tory or Labour, everything is in turmoil.
John Gaunt.
Shooting from the lip.
Welcome back to Political Misfits, the show that goes against the grain. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am here with my co-host, the irrepressible Bob Schlehuber. As I noted in the monologue today is everything, all things Super Tuesday. 14 states across the United States and the colony of America Samoa went to the polls to choose the candidate they prefer to exceed the Democratic primary. Last night was rather shocking, to be honest. As I said in the monologue, this is a dark, dark day. We have several people on the line, so hold on for a moment. Let's bring in the guests to discuss. We're joined by Teresa Lundy, communications strategist and principal at TML Communications. Teresa, how's it going tonight? This morning.
Well, I probably like the rest of the Americans, timid.
Timid, demoralized even. Before doing anything else, let's go through the results, and we can discuss it through the results. By the way, you guys, can call. I mean, we have, like I said, the lines are full at this point, so definitely give us a call. The number is 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. So before doing anything else, let's go to the results, just so we have a basis of understanding of what took place. Joe Biden wins Alabama. Joe Biden wins Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Texas. Those last two are the ones that burn the most. Sanders takes Vermont, Colorado, Utah, California. Oh, and there's one more for Joe Biden, which is Maine. Now, this is painful. The Texas and Massachusetts, especially, because it was expected that Sanders or Warren was going to take Massachusetts, not Warren coming in third and Sanders coming second. Joe Biden winning that was entirely because the vote was split between Warren and Sanders, and that Bloomberg wasn't a part of that contest. And so Biden was able to essentially come out on top. Teresa, this was not a good day. And, you know, Bob and I, we were having the debate on the whole race thing, or the conversation on race. He needs to do something on this, right? I mean, personally, I think this boils down to being more aggressive on going after and impeaching the credibility of your opponents. But clearly, something has to change. I mean, there needs to be some level of an autopsy. And before I bring you in, there's a video. Let's hear Sanders' new ad, because Sanders apparently has started to retool, I guess, his position or whatever, or the way he's pursuing this campaign, I guess, to some modest degree. And so let's listen to Sanders' new ad that he put up today.
Bernie is somebody who has the virtue of saying exactly what he believes, great authenticity, great passion, and is fearless. Bernie served on the Veterans Committee and got bills done. I think people are ready for a call to action. They want honest leadership who cares about them. They want somebody who's going to fight for them. And they will find it in Bernie. That's right, feel the burn.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Now, Teresa, for the longest time, people thought that Obama had endorsed Bloomberg. Sanders had avoided doing videos like this. But now, this seems to be a departure. So is this too little too late? Is this going to have the impact that he wants? Like, what's his goal in putting out this particular video, and is it going to work?
I think they're falling all over the place right now at their campaign, because we were just talking about this last week on some local blog podcasts where Bernie Sanders, was at the top spot. And we were thinking him and, Biden's out the water. And now we see the unexpected, or for some, the expected, because the Democratic machine has now overtook this. Like, wait a minute, we have somebody that doesn't even agree with our party. So I think the campaign is all over the place as they try to reconfigure what their voice is, and now they are talking to, or they're trying to talk to the African-American base, the women base. They already have the millennial base, but I think it's more so the minority base. Is it a little too late? I think they've already been, having their conversations, but I think the media has spun it as Representative Clybourne's endorsement of Biden and basically calling him a savior for Biden, that they're like, okay, who do we have that's African-American, the most influential African-American that we can get in the ad? And, of course, it's Barack Obama. For all that, they should just did Michelle.
But this could backfire, right? I mean, at this point,
Absolutely.
Obama may come out and support Biden. Meaning, I wouldn't be shocked if within a week, if Obama came out and endorsed Joe Biden, which for the most part puts a knife in this ad.
Mm-hmm.
And the caller, Calvin, earlier, he kind of made mention saying that black voters are hard to get across. And this is kind of my point of why I focus on this from the cross-examination standpoint. It's one thing to say you should vote for this person, his policies are better. They may or may not agree with you. It's another thing to show where the person was lying about civil rights. That seems to get more bang for your buck in regards to making people angry at you. And I'm saying this from my own family. I have family members who were on the board for Joe Biden, and when they found out that he was lying about civil rights, flipped on a dime. It's just so over the top in regards to the dishonesty. What do you think has more bang for its buck? An ad like this, or going after trying to impeach the credibility of the person who's saying we're talking?
You know what? Great question. So I definitely believe it's the credibility, but we got to be honest. If we're talking about anyone who has the most credibility with African Americans, I would say it is Bernie Sanders. He's walked the line. He's walked the civil rights line. But as it relates to policies, I would say it's Joe Biden. As it relates to some of the work that he has done in minority communities. So it's a twofold here. Bernie can literally stand on his own and talk about his work, his relationship with the African American community. I just think they're redirecting it wrong. I think Bernie would have did better. Him on camera, face shot, him talking about the experience, and we seeing photos of him actually doing the work. Sort of how we saw Bloomberg with the Get It Done type of ads, but actually Bernie on camera doing it.
So I think this goes to your point, Bob. Basically, it's not enough to have a pedigree of this. Like, you have to actually talk about these issues in a way that, I don't know.
Or if you don't show your pedigree.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. He's like, he should have been talking about this stuff the whole time.
Yeah.
And something is holding him back. And I've said this is what I'm saying when I go back to the strategist after 2016, talking to him. There's something holding him back about presenting that narrative. And it could be just humility. It could just be, I don't feel comfortable. I'm a white passing. I'm a Jewish man who lives in Vermont as a senator here. Why am I going to speak out on these black issues? I did the thing because it was the right thing. I didn't do it like I'm Joe Biden, because Joe Biden at 18 was in the shower practicing his presidential speech one day and getting to know black people so he could one day run for national office. Yeah. I don't think Sanders was calculating that like that. And I think that's held him back. And there's something that made him slightly just uncomfortable, or something that wasn't able to win and say, look, after 2016, I did mess up. Let us figure this out. And I think enough people tried so hard to talk to him, and he simply just said, there's something is off, either on the killer instinct, on the CV, on talking to black voters or engaging with that. Because if you do look at his record in history, it shouldn't be where it is right now, but yet he is here. And that's where he's at. Teresa, the other question, we'll talk more about the California results. It's not only that Bernie Sanders has a black voter issue. And I would argue in many ways he really doesn't, because there's plenty of young black voters that are out there for him.
We're just talking about older.
He has an age issue. It's over 65 is just not, there's just no turning the corner. And I'm just kind of curious of talking to people in that age demographic of why they're not able to shift away from Joe Biden.
You know what? And I actually find that as a very great question. So I'm, for the viewers who can't see my face, I'm an African-American woman, and I live in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, and I do have friends who are on Bernie's campaign from the region that have focused their efforts right here in Philadelphia and, of course, in PA. And so I did ask them, when they're at these senior centers, why, literally, this was 2 weeks ago, I asked them, I said, why do you think your seniors aren't connecting, to Bernie Sanders? And they're like, we don't know Bernie, but we know Biden. And we know Biden because we know Obama, right? And they're literally colliding the fact that, VP Biden and our former President Barack Obama, they walked hand in hand, throughout those whole 8 years. And one thing about Biden, he made sure that whatever Barack did, he was right there on the side, on his right shoulder, and making sure he was, in some of those pocket places. Like, I think when Rep. Kleinborn was on CNN earlier this morning, and he was talking about, listen, Joe Biden and his wife were, just randomly at a church meeting without doing politics. Come on. There's so many churches you could have went to, but you decided to go to South Carolina to go to church. So we got to be honest here. Right? That was extremely political, but we understand, because unlike Bernie Sanders has been building a movement since 2016, but that movement has not reached the 65-year-olds. His movement has specifically been geared to the revolution, when the revolution looks like the next generation and not the seasonal resident.
To put it in perspective, from between 65 and older, Biden gets 48 to 15. From 45 to 64, Biden gets 42 to 20. The moment that you get to like 18 to 29, Sanders gets 58 to 17. Like, the generational divide is extraordinary. And again, like you said, this is like younger blacks, Sanders, older blacks, Biden. So it's not straightforward to say that just blacks is a monolith. African Americans go to Biden 58 to 17 in Super Tuesday states. Now, Sanders wins every other demographic. in spades. I mean, Asian 41-14, Hispanic 35-26, white 27-34. But the issue is the black vote was so dominant, like in regards to the disparity between the two, that for the most part, it made up the gap, meaning it made the gap what that gap was. I still say it's like you have to create some level of, look, personally, I think this is where you go negative campaigning. And I think you go negative campaigning in order to show that Joe Biden is not being honest. And I think that would have gotten more bang for his buck.
Teresa, just one last question before we have to let you go. Our phone lines are so full. We have another guest that wants to join us from Texas, but we can't get him on until we get to some of you callers. So thank you for having this great problem. Teresa, just last question there. You are in Pennsylvania. You guys don't vote for a little while here, but I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on what that state's looking like. And that was the big thing from Super Tuesday is not these states aren't the swing states, right? These aren't the ones Ohio's, the Michigans, the Wisconsins, the Pennsylvanias, the Floridas. So tell us quickly just about Pennsylvania and what to expect from there.
Absolutely. So here's a quick circumference of what PA is looking like. It's looking like Biden. Why? Because Joe Biden and Senator Bob Casey are walking hand in hand. Senator Bob Casey is like the Kennedy of Pennsylvania, right? So, Senator Casey could literally go to sleep and he's still elected, right, without any campaigning. And to be quite honest, it's just how it is. Joe Biden has put his roots here. His base has literally started here. His first fundraiser was here with the CEO, who's now the strategist for Comcast network. So Bernie's going to have to put in some more work if he really wants to galvanize, but more importantly, he's going to have to put in the money.
I'm curious, what do you think he's going to do? Just one last question. I'm sorry. What do you think he's going to do what can he do in order to change that around?
Oh, Bernie Sanders?
Yeah.
He has to pick up all the consultants that Bloomberg reached out to, right? Because unlike Biden, now it's kind of it reminds me of Hillary Clinton's campaign, where whoever was on the campaign, they were in the campaign, and any outsiders, you were exiled. So if I'm Bernie, I'm picking up Bloomberg's consultants because his consultants had to be about, it was a lot. It was many consultants that was here in Pennsylvania only, and everybody wanted to be engaged. I think if he starts with that and starts with the ground game about specific issues as it relates to charter schools, public school districts, the green, the gun violence, and of course mass incarceration, he does that in PA, he may have a nice shift.
That was Teresa Lundy, communications strategist and principal at TML Communications. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us. We turn our attention now to the state of Texas. We're joined by Ashton P. Woods, who is a community activist with Black Lives Matter Houston. Ashton, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. I'm glad to be back.
I see our other callers there, Nick, Tyrese, JR, Trudy. I promise you the 1 o'clock hour Eastern time is all yours. We're saving those spots there for you, but we did want to check in with Ashton. I think the big shock of the night for many people was Joe Biden winning there in Texas. Sanders was out of the gate early with the early poll results in his favor. It seemed like it was just a matter of how much he would win by. And when many people woke up this morning, if they weren't able to stay up late into the evening, they woke up to a surprise that Joe Biden had won Texas. Ashton, I don't know if that was surprising to you. It was surprising to many people across the country. What was your take there from the ground there in Houston?
It wasn't surprising to me because I live here, right?
Sure.
I did know a lot of black folk and brown folk who were supporting Biden and who were supporting Bloomberg. I think they were always going to vote for them, and I believe that the issue is how we look at polling. We weren't asking the right people the right questions, and we were making assumptions as a collective about how things will turn out. Now, I will say that I thought it was going to be a tie race between Warren and Sanders. I know that sounds crazy, but based on what I've been seeing, it looked like the other votes outside of the black community might balance it out a little bit. And as you saw in the early vote results here in Texas, the top three, they kind of had similar numbers. So we were evenly split, and it's something that people need to start thinking about right now, as it looks like people are trying to push for Biden to be the nominee, is making sure that we're not disenfranchising Sanders voters and Warren voters because they're still in the race and they still have some form of viability, definitely Sanders. and that's what I'm seeing still here in Houston in particular, where I think the South Carolina piece is what actually broke voters towards Biden, who would have normally voted for Klobuchar or Buttigieg.
What was the question? You said people were asking the wrong questions. What were the questions that people should have asked in order to get the right result?
The question that should have been asked is why? Who are you? Not just who are you supporting, but what are your issues? And if we look at the exit polls, which ironically have been pretty accurate this cycle, a lot of them are looking for someone who reminds them of the Obama years. They were looking for someone who will bring them back to the normal that they were used to, as opposed to people like me who would be supporting like a Warren or a Sanders, who are looking for actual change as opposed to status quo. And I think that the expansion on the question should have been, why are you looking for one person to just support Trump? Why don't the other issues matter? Because you saw healthcare, education, climate change all become very small percentage numbers, which would normally show up big, even in the general election. And I found that to be strange.
Well, so what about the youth vote in Texas? Because, like you said, blacks aren't a monolith, especially it seems to break across the lines of youth versus the elderly. It seems that he had a cut in the number of people who came out for the youth vote. I mean, Sanders' argument was, I can expand the electorate, and if I can expand the electorate, I can bring new people into the voting thing. What was Texas like in that sense? Was he able to expand the electorate, or did people just stay home and he didn't necessarily, his theory of the case didn't come out in the way that he thought?
He expanded. I think he expanded. Because you got to remember, in Houston has the youngest population in the state. The average age in Houston is like 27 to 30 years old. So we showed up. I mean, the truth of the matter is this. People forget that there are other folks who are from different walks of life, and we are still in Texas.
That's a fair point. It is Texas. I think a lot of people had their hopes up, despite it being Texas, especially with the Hispanic demographic. I'm curious, what was the word on the ground? I mean, were you guys getting inundated with ads? I mean, looking at Bloomberg ends up, not doing great in Texas. I mean, he came up with 14.7%, which means that Biden, if Bloomberg wasn't in the race, would have won in heavier margins.
Well, Bloomberg did do a lot of ad buying, and he used a lot of the same language that what I was trying to say earlier before you cut me off is that there are in existence of black and brown conservative folks who identify as Democrats. And some they call themselves conservative Democrats, and they refuse to call themselves Republicans. But the truth of the matter is that people like Bloomberg appeal to them because he appealed to their sensibilities. And I don't mean to sound rude, but a lot of these people who turned out for Bloomberg and turned out for Biden basically were the same people who would probably have been supporting Hillary Clinton in her super predator comment. Because a lot of black folks was behind supporting that crime bill in '93. And those are the same people who are voting now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also curious, Ashton, as we don't have a ton of time with you, about some of these down ballot races. Obviously, Super Tuesday talking about the Democratic presidential primary, but there were some other races of the Senate race there, and one Congress race in particular I want to ask you about. The first is the Senate Democratic primary there. MJ Hager is going to head to a runoff. Not quite sure who yet will be the person that runs off against her, either Christina Zinzan Ramirez or Royce West, on coming up here on May 26th. Just give us the listeners a little bit of an idea of who MJ Hager is, and either if she'll have a chance to beat Cornyn or if there's no chance there in Texas for her.
To be honest with you, MJ Hagar was not even on my radar in Houston. He wasn't here a lot. And if you pay attention to a lot of the county numbers that were coming out, you'll see that the race was more competitive in Harris County than it was statewide, where you saw Amanda Edwards and you saw MJ Hagar, but you also saw other people who came in and the numbers were kind of even. I'm not sure how they look right now because I hadn't checked the county results. But through the night last night up until at least 2 o'clock this morning, will look pretty even. So she will have to do some work, the work of coming to Houston and in Harris County and surrounding areas to make sure that she's actually getting the biggest pot of votes that she can get in the state of Texas, because I didn't see it happening during the primary. I saw a little ad here, But I got no mail pieces, got no phone calls, no text messages, so no ads on Facebook, nothing.
You might not have been her target voter if I had to make a guess based on some of her endorsements that she and knowing you and the great work you do there in the state of Texas and in Houston. The other race I wanted to ask you, Ashton, about was the Texas 28th, Jessica Cisneros versus the current representative Henry Cuellar. Cuellar, big-time Republican, as a Democrat, I guess to say it in some ways, one of two anti-abortion House Democrats, as well as holds an A rating for the National Rifle Association. Jessica Cisneros, a 26-year-old immigration and human rights attorney, big-time endorsements. Both Sanders and Warren had endorsed her. That, for me, felt like this conversation of, are we going to ever have a Democratic Party split? It'd be because of races like this and these two candidates who are dramatically different, and I don't understand how these two candidates are somehow supposed to fit in the same party.
We're actually living in a time where people have been exposed for their madness and the methodologies of that madness. So I think there will be a split. There probably will be an actual viable third party, not that the Green Party doesn't exist or other parties don't exist. But I think where people won't feel like they're being bombarded with white male privilege, like at the Green Party and a couple of other parties, where you might see perspective black and brown folk. But the truth of the matter is that this is going to cause a fracture. And I've been thinking that the whole time that people are going to be alienated. And when we're talking about the young vote showing up, we were just told, sit down and wait your turn. And I even posted on Facebook this morning, I feel like if Biden becomes a nominee, we're going to be waiting 20 more years to get criminal justice reform based on his language and his past historical actions. And, his last comment about marijuana being a gateway drug, no, marijuana is a mass incarceration drug that you made into a drug to mass incarcerate black and brown people in large amounts. And I think that we will be taking 10 steps backwards. It's like either way, less extremes from Trump and a return to normalcy to some folks. But I remember a return to normalcy for me pre-2016 would be me in the streets protesting again because of bad immigration policies and the lack of attention to detail to make sure that we're taking advantage of every chance to reform immigration and to decriminalize black and brown bodies. And it seems like that's what we're going to return to. If that's normal, I don't want it.
So wait, Sanders, because you're making a really good point. He wasn't able to make that argument effectively in Texas?
I think he was. I think, here's the thing. We have people who vote, right? And a lot of those people watch TV. Now, if you watch TV, you watch My 20 or one of the off channels instead of watching the big three like ABC, Fox, and CBS, because you have a cell phone that still limits your data and you got to watch a minute. We're talking about people who don't have smartphones like the kind we're talking on, like the kind I'm talking about right now. We're talking about people who go to work three jobs, got children, and they live everyday life and probably don't ever watch the news except for when they have a hurricane is coming. And they heard Bloomberg's voice, and they heard Biden's voice, and they heard the radio because they don't have Pandora. They're listening to 97 on a box, a local station. They're listening to where people are buying ad buys. And they're going to go and vote for a specific person because somebody told them to. And we need folks out there who are going to canvass, who are going to knock doors and say, these are the issues. Which one of these affects you? And when I ran for office, which I lost yesterday as well because I ran for House District 146, against a Democratic incumbent who I decided to primary for various reasons that we're talking about right now, is that we're seeing a resurgence of conservatism, and it's because people are not talking to other folks and saying what the issues are, and finding out why if Tommy, a little black boy, went to a predominantly black school, bought a gun to school was because he was being bullied, as opposed to little Richard, who's going to a predominantly white school and wants to shoot everybody up because he got rejected by some girl. You know what I mean? Like, we're not having these conversations, and that's why we're having the results that we're having.
That was Ashton P. Woods, a community activist with Black Lives Matter Houston. Ashton, thank you for not only joining us, but thank you for primary establishment Democrats and taking the fight to the street. And that's what, for so many people, like I said at the end of our show, go out and organize and run. That's how you win. You got to win at the doors. So, Ashton, thank you big time on behalf of Political Misfits. Thank you for joining us. I got our callers on the line here where they're jammed up. I'm so excited. The 1 o'clock hour. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're coming to you. So get ready. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik Live in Washington, D.C. We're back after this.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber here with Jamarl Thomas, a very fired up, ready to break some things. Jamarl Thomas. Get ready to go against the grain or smash a vase or break some glass. You're doing it here on Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., 105.5 FM. You can check us out on Twitter or Facebook, Sputnik Misfits there on Twitter. You can also download this podcast. If you don't have a chance to catch us live from 12 to 2 every day, you can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all those good podcast platforms you may want to check out. A few big pieces of news earlier today here. Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire, outdid the other billionaire, Ross Perot, and said, let me spend some money foolishly and not get great results.
In the primary, no less. In
the primary, nonetheless, he lasted one day. As much as he's been around for a month or two now running this stuff, he actually was only on the ballot for a day.
How much did he spend?
It's like $500. Somebody told me it was $11 million per delegate that he eventually won.
Oh, wow. $500 million.
$500 million. And not only that, he also came out and endorsed Joe Biden. The big question now, what does Elizabeth Warren do?
Now,
March 15th is the next debate. And so some people say, can't she hang on 11 days to get to that next debate? I don't know, man.
You don't think so?
I don't know what does she do at this point. She's not gonna drop out and endorse Sanders.
Right.
She's not gonna do the thing everybody's like, oh, just let her, just do it, just come on, like let's have a fight battle royale.
She shows up. That one, yeah.
And now if she endorses Biden, like that's also she's not gonna do that.
What is your model of Warren? Because I've given you my model, Warren. Look, I think she's a creature of the party. And when I say creature of the party, I'm talking about going all the way back to 2016 with the deal with Clinton, with the deal from the standpoint of policy proposals that she wanted to get enacted, all the way to now, where, in 2020, you have all of these people who are creatures of the party, very specific of stopping Sanders. Even Bloomberg got into the race with a very explicit point.
I don't think she's like, I want to stop Sanders, but she deeply believes in the Democratic Party. She's not coming in. She was a Republican shifting into the Democratic Party from the right. She's not a Sanders saying, I'm going to step in from the left and then pull it to the left kind of thing. She's someone that deeply believes in the party. But I promised our callers we would take your call. So let's start here. JR, thank you for your patience. What's happening?
Hey, guys, thanks for the call. When we think about, I would have loved to have seen Bernie take the gloves off a little bit more. Even my spouse, who's like a meek little lamb, she's like, watching debates, and she tells me, she's like, he needs to be a little bit more aggressive than what he's being. But at the same time, I do think that Bernie, I don't think that he articulated how his policies would benefit, African Americans. I don't think he articulated that well enough, especially when I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think right now he's pulling in like less than 20% of the vote from the African American community. And so I think, when you think about his student loan forgiveness program, the fact that, Business Insider released an article that showed that program would,
cut income inequality like 12 to 1 or something.
Wealth gap from 12 to 1 to 5 to 1. That's a pretty big deal. That needs to be, articulated. And not to mention the fact that, African Americans, are crowding prisons, and what, his marijuana, legalizing marijuana and then expunging the records of those of nonviolent offenders. That's a pretty big deal. And I just wish he would have articulated that a little bit better, because right now, as it stands, African Americans, and particularly the older crowd, are very pragmatic. And you've got to help them understand, even though Bernie's talking about class, African Americans somehow felt left out. I'm African American, and I know, when you go and talk to African Americans, they will say, well, if you talk to them about his plans, they'll say, well, how is he going to pay for it? They're asking questions like that. That's the first thing they want to know. So I think they voted for Biden because he's familiar. They know him, and, they're looking to go back to the same old, but it's Bernie's job to articulate the fact that, the same old is how we got Trump. And if we go back to that, we better pray and hope we don't get something worse than that in the future.
Yep, JR, thank you for the call. Let's keep on grinding through the different calls here. Ben, thank you so much for hanging on and calling back in. You're on Political Misfits. What's on your mind?
Hey, I don't like it when y'all fight. Like, can we all get along?
No. I don't fight you too, Ben.
It's not a fight. It's a debate.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, that is true. You need distinctions between y'all points of view. I totally get it.
Yeah. It's a debate show. But go for it. I'm sorry.
So one, last night was kind of rough. Just a little bit. I think the thing here, in regarding to him being more aggressive, if you look at the different primaries, like the Republican primary, for instance, a lot of their states are like winner take all. And on the Democratic side, it's more proportional. So a person like Trump can afford to suppress turnout as long as he gets just slightly more than the other guy, and he can walk away with like everything. Versus, say, on the Democratic side, where, and a lot of this is traditional as well, if you end up, like, say, attacking your opponent, you might actually that might end up hurting you long term, because a lot of those voters may not go to you because it's a proportional system, up until the point the super delegates just say whatever the heck they want to.
It may backfire, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think it's one part that, and also, because like I wouldn't say that he doesn't have like a killer instinct. He clearly does when he has the go-ahead to. Like, nobody likes Trump, as an example. So he can just call him things that he never said last time about Hillary, like, oh, Trump is a pathological liar. He says stuff that's blatantly not true. Imagine if he would have said that against Hillary, though. He may have ended up winning the primary, but it would have suppressed turnout on that side. Now, I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's silly, but it's more like social psychology here.
Oh, it's not silly. I mean, it does make sense. If you're attacking a particular candidate and the people identify with that candidate, they're going to be angry at you just by definition for attacking their candidate. So I do get it. It's just, is that true for somebody like Biden? Like Sanders, I don't expect Sanders to call Biden racist or sexist or anything like that. But the fact that he would run an ad talking about Social Security where he would show Joe Biden's position on Social Security change, meaning Joe Biden says one thing and something else, shows that he has propensity to do it. It's just what he just chooses to do it with. I agree with you and the other caller. Like, you have to look, he lost to the black vote, basically. I mean, 58 to 17 or something like that. And I do think you have to talk into that community, or talk specifically to that community, meaning the class argument. I don't know if that's entirely enough. Or at the very least, use it to impeach your witness or impeach the person who's running in the race. He just doesn't seem to do it. But I don't think that backfires on him. Am I crazy, Bob? Does that backfire?
Well, Ben, you wanted to get back in there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, right. Well, just quickly, that's why, like, look at what happened, whether you agree with her politics overall or not, with Tulsi and Kamala, right? She, did, what Bane did to Batman. It was not pretty. But did she get all of Kamala's voters? She did not. So unless you have a literal Dark Knight, as an example, on Bernie's behalf, go up and, for example, kneecap someone like Elizabeth Warren, you're probably not going to see him do that. He's going to be focusing on creating maybe it's a bit too late, I don't know, distinctions between him and Biden.
Yeah.
And he's not going to really lay a finger, you had the go, Hillary's favorability ratings were so low. He actually had the go-ahead, in my opinion, within the party to go out and actually, be more aggressive with her. But he did not. Now you have someone like Elizabeth Warren who, what Bob said, has capitalized, rightly or wrongly, on the identity politics game. And now there's this, front that he's just not really able to permeate. If you had another person in there, an actual, woman of color, you could say, who, is not afraid to go in there, he might be able to do something, but I just don't.
Yeah, I hear you, Ben. I really appreciate it. Thank you for playing Peacemaker there with us as well and calling in. Nick, you're on the line. Nick, thanks for your patience and holding. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate the time. I feel like I've listened to the whole show on my phone frequently, but I enjoy it anyways. I think Bernie, I think he's got the winning message. I think he's got monumental uphill battle. I mean, and he has to basically educate the nation on his policies, and that in itself is a problem. But then you got the whole DNC working against him, and all these people who are supposed to be nice or honest actors are pretty much just like Jamal likes to say, kneecapping him. And I feel like it's imperative for him to have to show his teeth, and I think Bernie has that that fight in him, especially when you guys like you guys said with regard to Trump
or Bloomberg
or Bloomberg or any oligarch basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like he needs to do a better job of calling out the situation for what it is. I mean, it's different if he's got backup like Tulsi. I think she was kind of that chess piece for him. But
well, Nick, thank you for holding. Go charge your phone. I'm sure you use some of your battery there holding with us. Good problems to have. Sanders got the backup. What are you talking about? He's got him. He's got Barack Obama. He's got the new ad out in Florida. If you haven't had a chance to see it, check it out. Trudy, have you had the chance to see the new ad that Sanders has out there with Barack Obama? How do you feel about that and whatever else is on your mind?
What's going on, Trudy? How's it going?
Hi, Jamal. Hello, Bob.
Hey.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, so it's just basically an ad of Barack Obama just saying nice things about Bernie Sanders, but so much of the criticism has been Sanders is speaking out against Obama, the establishment, and now he's turned to the familiar voice that so many people want to hear. But that aside, what did you want to call in and talk about today?
Oh, well.
Yeah, yep.
Everybody that's gone seriously on the attack is now out of the race. Warren lost support when she attacked Bernie. Democrat voters don't want attacks. They want policy.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard is still in the race.
Yeah, but...
And Warren collapsed when she came out for health care, not when she attacked Sanders.
I mean, she's got one delegate.
Who are you talking about, Gabbard? I know, but you said everybody who attacked was out of the race. I'm making the point that she's not out of the race. And also that the reason for Warren collapsing had everything to do with her being disingenuous with health care, not necessarily because she went after Sanders.
Well, I disagree. I think it's because they don't like vicious attacks, especially dishonest ones.
Now, that part I agree with, Trudy, but is it dishonest? Like when Joe Biden made the Social Security thing and Sanders made the video showing Joe Biden's talking about Social Security back then versus him lying about it now. Is that an attack video? Yes, technically, but is it a wrong video to play? I don't think so. It's fair game. I mean, Joe Biden was lying.
I agree. As long as he sticks with facts and policy, he'll do all right. And that's what he's been doing. He's been mentioning negatives about Joe.
Yep. All right, Trudy, thank you so much for the call. I think there's a 1-2 punch coming up in a few weeks that Sanders may be able to play. We'll talk about that more. Let's get to these first callers that have been waiting. Tyrese, thank you for waiting and calling back again to Political Misfits. What's on your mind today?
Okay, I got to clarify this. You know, I'm in the middle. Okay, I believe in some liberal policy and some policy that leans to the right as well.
Okay.
And at the same time, with me saying that, you got two major factors why Bernie lost. It was the first one was he wasn't strong. He should attack. He should attack Biden on his lying. Number two, you had open primaries with some of these states where you had people voting for Biden. Okay, that was a major factor. And number three, because I was in a union, I was working for a shipyard, and I was a tradesman. On the job, sometimes people used to talk about, these companies hiring undocumented people or immigrants. And what that was going to do is drive down the wages. Because Bernie Sanders is pro undocumented worker, I think in the South, which we are affected with it the most, is that I think some black people and poor white people that's blue dog Democrats saw that and probably was afraid of Bernie Sanders. What y'all think about that?
Thank you, Tyrese, for your call.
I don't know if Joe Biden, I don't know if Sanders is pro undocumented worker. I don't know. Keep in mind, Sanders is a socialist, and when he talks about these class issues, oftentimes he's talking about these issues in the context of people getting better wages. Meaning, if you want to say that he's for citizenship, where people can work and get a decent wage.
Yeah,
and
I think it's the idea. And I think
wage.
maybe that's what Tyrese is going there for, is just basically, if Sanders' argument is that undocumented workers aren't competing and making it harder for, say, poor blacks or poor whites to get jobs. He's saying, look, if we can help them get jobs legally and bring them into the system, they can unionize competitively, and it'll help everybody, as opposed to pitting those groups against one another. We have one more caller before we have to take a break. Brian, you got about 30 seconds with us. Thank you so much for holding what's on your mind today.
Hey, what's up, fellas, man? Man, I am so upset, bro. But you want to know something? It is Bernie's fault, because Bernie should have hit Biden really hard when he was weak. Biden's been weak for a long time now, and he could have hit him, but he chose not to, and that backfired on him.
Especially South Carolina, right? I mean, because at one point Sanders had closed the gap in South Carolina, and I don't know if he was coasting. I don't know what was going on, but it's like you have to win a one game. I mean, you got to put the guy down. Why Biden? Because now he's going to run through the next week with effectively a gauntlet of press screaming that Joe Biden is the comeback kid, Joe Biden is the front runner, Sanders can't get the black vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is belied by the evidence. I mean, if you're looking at the primary results, Sanders got every other demographic with the exception of the black vote in Super Tuesday states, but those are the South, and these are older African Americans that we're talking about. But that's not going to stop the media's, running with this as if this is, this race, Joe Biden has come back, Joe Biden is in the lead, Joe Biden is the dominant person. Like, that's going to be positive media attention going for the entire week. So it's like, instead of trying to win a one game in South Carolina by going all in, you end up with a situation now where South Carolina allows a bump 2 days into Super Tuesday, meaning he gets a bump going into the election itself. And, I was reading the stats. I think it was like 6 out of 10 people who chose at the last minute chose Biden. Super Tuesday bump.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep. Brian, thank you so much for the call. We go from the south of America to the west. We're joined by Dr. Bill Honigman. Dr. Bill, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing okay. Great to be on with you, and great that you guys have your own show now. So I've been a fan of your work for some time, both you, Bob, and Jamal, and so great to be with you. Thanks.
Greatly appreciate it. You are the California State Coordinator and co-coordinator of the Healthcare as a Human Right Issue Organizing Team for Progressive Democrats of America out there in California. You're the only silver lining, I guess, of last night for many Bernie Sanders there in California. I guess I want to ask 2 questions. Obviously, healthcare continuing to play a big role on people's minds. The exit polls there had about 57% of people supported replacing all private health insurance with a single government plan for everyone. The other big takeaway there for me, looking at the California exit polls, was simply the fact that Bernie Sanders seems to have an age issue. Those over 65 years old are not turning a vote for Sanders and overwhelmingly are voting for Joe Biden. Anybody under the age of 65, let alone under the age of 35, overwhelmingly went to Sanders. Dr. Bill, you've talked to a lot of older people, I am sure, along the way. Why were older voters 65 and older, 55 and older, why are they not willing to break from Joe Biden?
Yeah, so that is a terrific question. Here on the left coast, it's kind of, last night was good news, bad news. I mean, the good news is the blue wave continues. If you look at where we were in 2016, certainly it's progress. We lost to Hillary Clinton last time. The progressive movement is progressing, and the left coast seems still to be the epicenter of that blue wave. We wish it was a blue tsunami, but it's not. And so I think the rest of the country has a lot of catching up to do, and that's the California bias. We think, and oftentimes it plays out that we're 10 or 20 years ahead of the rest of the country in that way. But it is progress. The question is whether it'll be enough progress to overcome these existential threats. And we know we have 2 of them. We have global annihilation, meaning the 6th mass extinction, which far too many people are still in denial about. So maybe people need for it to be worse before they wake up to those effects of climate change, and then a personal existential threat, which is healthcare, because all of us are suffering. There is no, plan. There is no private insurance, corporate-driven insurance plan that provides you the protection that Medicare for All will provide. So real freedom is Medicare for All, and we need the rest of the country to catch on to that.
When you say it get worse real quick, I'm curious, would maybe like tornadoes on the same day that you go and vote make it seem worse to you that maybe you shouldn't vote for the corporate Democrat that's talking about going back to the Paris Climate Accord, which has no teeth or no actual viability in addressing major environmental catastrophes? Maybe something like that would wake people up. But accordingly, I hope everybody in Tennessee is okay. I hope everybody's doing okay. My heart is out to you.
Use Tennessee
But
as a
please,
prop. Right.
please, what is worse at some point here tomorrow?
So, one of the interesting questions I think needs to be asked, what's the language that Sanders needs to use? Because, look, I agree with you. I mean, the things that you're talking about from a policy standpoint, agree. These are policies that will dramatically benefit the elderly. I have a mom, I have an uncle. Many of these people have a sick mom, and they still have to work despite the fact being in the age of retirement and having a relative that's ill. Between the two people, or between the people in the race, there's one person that is pushing for policies that will dramatically affect those people for whatever reason. He seems incapable of articulating that to the older demographic. Like I said, between 45 and 64, Biden pulled 42%, Sanders pulled 20%, 65 and older, Biden pulled 48%, to Sanders 15%. Despite having better policies for whatever reason, he can't articulate them in a way that the elderly population will grasp. What is his issue in communicating this particular point?
I think there are two fundamental disbeliefs. One is that the older demographic still thinks we can't have nice things, right? So it's like the South. The South thinks that we really can't escape slavery and Jim Crow. I mean, really, seriously, and they're willing to nominate a person who was part of, the deporter-in-chief administration, so that the travesty of kids in cages will still exist, as far as I can tell, under Joe Biden. So maybe we need stronger language, like you were saying in your previous segment, to go after Biden, on that issue. But we also have a disbelief of young people, and we still aren't seeing the dramatic turnout that we'd like to see in our youth to turn out to vote. And their disbelief is that their vote matters. They really don't think their vote matters yet. So we still have kind of failed the messaging in both regards, to the youth as well as to the older demographic.
Yeah, just to point out the vote tally for the youth. In Tennessee, 11% of the youth voters showed up versus 15% in 2016. In Virginia, young voters comprised 13% of the electorate compared to 16% in 2016. I mean, he's winning these groups by massive, massive margins. But again, the numbers weren't there.
Let's go back to we have a caller on the line here. Daniel, you're on the air, Political Misfits. We have quite a few calls, so let's try to keep our questions condensed just so we can get to all of you out there today. But thank you so much for patiently waiting. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to agree with him that because I live in San Antonio, Texas, there's this air of we can't have nice things. But I want to point out the fact that do not let go of Bloomberg. Bloomberg is in the race still. I know he dropped out, but got to remember, Biden has dementia. And I guarantee he's going to go up to the convention, then back out because he has his health reasons. And you're going to see Bloomberg or somebody else get put in his place. The only reason why Biden is in the race is what nobody consents to keep Sanders out.
Daniel, thank you for the call. Only one of the four of us on this call right there are doctors, so I'll say allegedly is having cognitive disabilities for Biden, which are pretty clear at this point, but I'm not going to diagnose him with anything. But obviously people are staying close or in the race still because they are, big. You should have general concerns about Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, and I think that's kind of why some people may Elizabeth Warren stay in the race longer, just saying, hey, who knows what happens to these guys
Elections are stressful,
every
man.
day. Yeah, coronavirus, and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
but
fully.
Stedman, you're on the line here. You also have some comments around Bernie Sanders.
Hey, so Stedman, I called yesterday.
Yes, sir.
From Detroit, talking about the situation with Bernie. And so I think kind of my own, I guess my assessment of the situation is just he still didn't make those changes that you guys talked about earlier. We talked about like voter outreach or black voter outreach. And I mean, this is something he's going to have to try to do now. But he had 4 years to set an infrastructure. I donated money. I donated $10 a month for my wife and myself in 2016. And his lack of a black agenda or any type of specific black like language in any of his policies, and his unwillingness to fight against the Democratic establishment really kind of stopped me from donating this time around. Because I mean, I wanted somebody to fight, right? I mean, if you get cheated, you should fight. And so it's like a combination of things that I don't know. I don't know if he wants to fight. I was going to try to go canvass for him this weekend, and it's just like, how can I tell the people in my community to go vote for Bernie? What can I point to them to say, hey, he's going to fight for you for this. He's going to make sure you get this. He got cheated. He's getting cheated. He's been getting cheated. He's been getting attacked, and he hasn't shown a willingness to defend himself. How can I convince my cousins, my nephews, my neighbors, older, to go out and give him a chance? How can I convince them that there's any possibility that he'll actually fight for them?
Yeah, I hear you, Stedman. Thank you so much for calling in, and thank you for engaging in civics. Dr. Bill, you're with Progressive Democrats of America. How much is Sanders getting cheated by the Democratic National Committee at this point, and how much is he just running up against a very entrenched establishment that has the media and a ton of money behind them?
A whole lot. With respect to both, actually. So what you saw, was corporate media and establishment media lined up to crown Bernie Sanders as the front runner, and then wham, came out with a swift kick with the corporate Democratic establishment come after him. And basically that's what happened with the alignment of Buttigieg, Klobuchar, now Mike.
Bloomberg now.
And that was all to be expected. Nobody, it's first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and now they're fighting us. So the fight is on. It's not over. And we take this now to phone banking all across the country, and we get that magic number for the Democratic Convention. But, on the other hand, none of us is naive enough to think that the fight is not going to come at a cost, and that means lost hours of sleeping and worry, and which those of us who are solidly committed to this will continue with. So we just keep it going. We ramp it up even. Ramp up the rhetoric when we have to, and we still fight for the cause. It is not just about our presidential nominee. It's also about our platform. It's about having a political party that really expresses the will of the people instead of the corporation, and it's about Congress too. So all of that is in play here, and that's why nobody should feel dejected enough to give up.
No, they shouldn't give up. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of votes still need to be cast. It's just one of those day after demoralizations. Demoralized the day after. We have a few comments. Ray Foley, it's the machine. Why do you think they don't have paper? Check out Kennedy election fraud, Melania Miley, Judas Priest. Don't you think Bernie could use the prefix as a friend? I like to point out these issues. Trump won't be so kind, then break into the attack. Darren Levy, the big thing for progressives to do is convince Bernie to run independent in the general. Otherwise, Trump would be elected. That's something we mentioned earlier today. Trudy, media attacks on Bernie about Cuba and down ballot coattails are pumping South Carolina is what made the difference. Panic attacks scare people.
We have a few callers here. Let's get to before we take our next break. Tim, you're on the line. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Please, thanks for calling.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say the main point I wanted to make is I think that we on the left really need to understand that the same kind of people who voted for George W. Bush are the same kinds of people on our side that are going to vote for Joe Biden. Like, it's not just about policy. If you don't have a candidate who is likable and at least is showing that they're trying to appeal to a broader audience, you can't win a presidential election. It's just not going to happen. Like Bob had already said, there been people that were in the campaign that told him to make some adjustments, and he just didn't do them. Like, it didn't come off as genuine that he was actually trying to get specifically the Southern black vote, which is a more conservative vote. You can't be in South Carolina on stage talking about you want to have marijuana dispensaries all over the country and have black people selling marijuana. That's going to turn off older black voters. Now, voters in Ohio, black voters in California, they might be more responsive to that. But until he actually starts talking to black outlets, it doesn't have to be specifically, I'm doing this black plan, or I'm trying to have a black agenda. Until people actually see him in the community, not Breonna Joy Gray, not Nina Turner, until they start seeing him not only be in the community, but be able to get more people, more black organizers in the ground on his campaign, he's not going to be able to win the Rust Belt, and that's what he has to win this election.
Yep, Tim, thank you so much for the call. We have one more caller here. Vinny, you're on the air.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Hey.
I think Bernie Sanders is having the same problem that Corbyn had in the UK. I'm calling from the UK. So I'm kind of having like a deja vu moment at a minute. When Sanders won the first three, I was screaming inside my head about the idea of the moderate vote, because they kept repeating. One problem I think with progressives is that they think they rely too much on facts. And they've got all facts, and they've got all the evidence and all that stuff, and they just want to like ram it down people's throat.
And it's not enough. Like, arguments aren't won by just a better debate. You know what I mean? There's more to it than just having or winning the point.
Exactly that. And that's one of the problems progressives are having at the moment. They rely too much on facts, and they don't seem to want to control the narrative. It's like when they call out the moderate vote, you just call them out. You say, okay, since they say they've got a moderate vote, let somebody take that position and come and face me. You get what I'm saying? So if Sanders had done that, he would have controlled at the point at which the pressure is on the moderate, because we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew at some point all the moderates were going to like form Voltron and go. So he should have seen that coming, but he should have controlled at the point at which, the pressure was on all of those candidates for him to control the narrative. And that's the problem progressives have at the moment, controlling the narrative. It's not just about facts and logic and providing evidence and all that.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, for your call. Those are all great points. Dr. Bill Honigman, you continue to join us there from California. We'll give you a little last word on anything you may have heard there.
Well, I absolutely agree with that last caller, and we present the facts on climate change, on healthcare all the time. In fact, it's 70% of people who like Medicare for all. Not 52 or 56%, 70%. So that's a fact, and it's also considered a value that people have. And, this is where right and left come together, maybe around back, and create a big tent instead of linear thinking, which is that, we all want clean air, clean water. We all want our kids to do better in life. We all want health care for our friends, family, and coworkers. So that's not, center right, center left, moderate. That's big tent. That's popular. And so you're absolutely right. That has to be part of the messaging, and that's what we need to do moving forward.
That was Dr. Bill Honigman, the California State Coordinator and co-coordinator of the Healthcare as a Human Right Issue Organizing Team for Progressive Democrats of America. Dr. Bill, where can people go to learn more about Progressive Democrats of America?
That's pdamerica.org. P as in progressive, D as in Democrats, America.org.
Dr. Bill, thank you for joining us. We're going to take a quick break before we have a special guest come join us for this week's Revelation segment, our weekly 1:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time segment. You're listening to Political Misfits live in Washington, D.C. We're back after this. So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik. It is Wednesday, 1:30. You can hear that particular sound, so you know it is time for Revelations. Now, we're not going to have a UFO segment today. We're not going to have anything that creeps and crawls and comes out of the cupboard. No, we are going to talk about the election. Now, we are happy to be joined by our very own nervous producer, Michelle Whitty. My name is Jamal Thomas. Of course, I'm here with my co-host, Bob Schlehuber. Guys, feel free. We've had a lot of calls today, 202-521-1320. Now, Michelle, you would like to discuss the election. Now, and what we're going to say, the revelations, has to do with media and its outsized influence in regards to the perspectives of human beings.
Can't believe you outed me as nervous.
Excited, brilliant, intelligent.
Yeah, there we go. Let's go with that.
Insightful.
Deep. Stoic.
All those things. No, I mean, this is not really a revelation, but it was a point that was really driven home to me last night as I was watching the results roll in, that this is absolutely a victory for corporate media. Yeah. You know, I remember, I mean, I try not to watch, I don't watch a lot of cable news programming, right? But I do keep up with what is on it. And I was at my grandparents' house a couple of months back, and they switch between Fox News and MSNBC, which are equally difficult to tolerate. But MSNBC for the last almost a year has been just nonstop positive coverage for Joe Biden. And last night, I think we saw the impact of that. There were people pointing out online that also last night was a loss for campaigns in general, and people pointing out that, you know what Joe Biden's ground game was? MSNBC, CNN. I mean, there are studies. In These Times did a study back in November of MSNBC's primetime coverage of the Democratic primary and found that Biden was mentioned twice as often as Warren and 3 times as often as Sanders. He was mentioned on his own about a quarter of those times. I think Sanders was mentioned alone 1% of the time and Warren 3%, or maybe I've mixed those up. Whereas, you know, the mentions that Sanders get were much more likely to be negative. Whereas the negative treatment that Biden got, it was about his gaffes and about how they would affect his electability.
Even calling it a gaffe.
Yeah, gaffe, that's funny, right? Oh, how's old bumbling Uncle Joe going to get out of this one this time? You know what I mean? This is their quote-unquote negative coverage. They're not talking about his war votes. They're not talking about his Social Security flip-flops or any of the rest of this stuff. So it feels like what we witnessed was an absolute collapse of corporate media responsibility, which is not something new, but, you know, just last night it was put into really stark terms. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that really infuriates me is healthcare, right? On this issue of healthcare, the negative coverage of Biden is not asking him why he doesn't want to provide or work to provide healthcare access for all Americans. Yeah. And also, you know, failing to put this into a corporate context, into a global context, right? What drives me absolutely out of my mind is watching these talking heads and debate moderators line up to grill any candidate who dares tell Americans that they can aspire to more, to line up to grill them about how are you going to pay for it, when they never put our shoddy healthcare system into a global context. Because I can speak as someone who has received healthcare, gotten sick, and gotten treated in many countries around the world. And I would rather get a root canal in any of them than in this country. Right? I've broken bones in my foot. I've gotten dental care. I've gotten emergency treatment for asthma attacks in Kazakhstan, right? Not like Denmark, you know what I mean? Not Norway. We're talking Taiwan, Kazakhstan, Oman. You know, much rather get sick there because I'm not going to go broke and I am going to go get treated and I'm going to go home to go on to my life where, you know what, I can actually have dreams that don't leave me tied to a corporate job or a spouse that has a corporate job because I can't afford to take any risks because I need to pay, you know, $7,000 a year in healthcare premiums. And so like the failure of the media to actually show Americans what is possible is something that I feel is utterly shameful.
That is utterly shameful. I mean, there's this notion of we can have big things. It's off the table. I think part of that has to do with basically everybody who's on media is rich. I mean, I can't say everybody, that's hyperbolic, but the overwhelming majority of the talking heads that you see are tens of millions of dollars in general. Their concerns are different than our concerns. I mean, they don't care about healthcare. They can afford their healthcare. They don't care about sending their kids to school. They can afford it. So you have all of these millionaires paid by billionaires lining up as if they don't have a political ideology. They clearly do because they don't find value in these particular items that we're talking about.
And guess what stocks are climbing today? Health insurance stocks.
Biden,
Yes.
yeah.
So, you know, we had just wall-to-wall coverage of I mean, there are some of these headlines. Print media, right? Running Sanders against Trump would be an act of insanity. Bernie can't win. Sanders' Trump-like campaign is a disaster for Democrats. And these are a lot of these are headlines in op-eds by Democratic groups.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, we see this reward. Joe Biden didn't have to be knocking on doors, right? He didn't have to have people out there talking about the issues because he had free positive coverage for a year.
Bob?
Oh yeah, I mean I completely agree. I mean just the one that I think of in 2016, somebody put out all the Washington Post like negative ads. It was like 16 and 16
in 24 hours or
yeah,
something.
I mean,
Yeah,
just
it was
constantly.
insane.
I think it was like the Post had an article of like Bernie Sanders would be a horrible president. That was like the opinion piece that they're publishing in there, and we saw the erasure. Even somebody like Andrew Yang too. I mean, just completely cut off the kneecaps, misreporting numbers, not including him in certain poll results or how he was doing thus far. Again, if you don't fit into a certain box that is acceptable for these corporate outlets, and it's not only just their media outlets themselves, it's the executives at all these companies with big dollar donations holding those big dollar fundraisers, and these are the people that like vacation at the Hamptons all together. I mean, these are people that are all together. Nobody's ever critical of them because you want to be buddies with them when you reach for the glass of wine and champagne at the Hampton summer. I don't know if that where rich people go at the Hamptons. I think that sounds. I don't know where rich people go. Yeah, it sounds cool. I guess I'm not being invited to it. Yeah. One day. I can dream.
Yeah.
Go Joe Biden. I endorse him right now. Where's my ticket to the
There you
Hamptons? Is that
go.
how it works?
You're going to get $50,000 a month working for some energy company. in
Bloomberg
Ukraine?
or something. Right. right, 100 byte.
You're set.
That's only if you're a crackhead, and that's only if you're Joe
And the
Biden's
stuff,
son.
if you
Hey,
speak
man,
of energy
I can do that crack thing. if that is what it takes.
If that's what that's what it
And
is.
it's not, you say energy company, it just kind of triggers something for me. It's not just at the highest levels too, but it's just how these energy, like I think of Pepco, which is the natural gas utility provider here in Washington, D.C., not good for the environment. They're trying to increase rates over the next 3 years. It's percentage-wise, and so obviously that's going to hit people that are the poorest. Those small dollar penny increases add up. And what do? They go and are the lead sponsor of the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Walk and Parade this year in Washington, D.C. So it's not like they're just buying the president. They buy people across the board. They buy little festivals, little social justice events. They buy all this stuff off. And so nobody wants to challenge it. I mean, it's the Bloomberg basic thing, right? Just pay anybody and everybody, nonprofit, philanthropy, politics, and you just start buying people's allegiances. It's quite disgusting. Let's get to some callers after Michelle's comment right here real quick.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm not ready to give up on the power of movements and grassroots organizing or anything else like that. But I think it is time to stop making criticism of the mainstream media a sort of crank issue and really realize what we are up against and start promoting alternative outlets and trying to get people to listen to them. I don't know. We've got to try and start reaching people here. But we've got to try and drag this out into the open, I think.
Yeah, Michael, you're on the air here with Political Misfits, Bob Schlaber, Jamal Thomas, and Michelle Whitty. Michael, what's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going? I was just hearing what Michelle was saying and also the previous caller, and I just wanted to add on to that. I think the main issue was that politics really comes down to marketing, and Bernie has misunderstood the best way that he could market himself. For example, the Orange Clown, for all his faults, understood from the very beginning that the establishment wasn't going to just give up and let him take the reins. So he fought, he attacked. He was never on defense. And Bernie has always tried to defend every position, whether it's healthcare, this and that, instead of just attacking back. Where in the debates, they would constantly, every single debate was about how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? All he had to do was, why don't you guys ever ask my colleagues how we are going to pay for trillions of dollars in wars? Why doesn't that ever come up? Well, it's because you guys are all corporate hacks, etc. He was never on the attack, and he never understood that from the beginning he had to market himself just like Donald Trump did, but in the opposite sense, that he was the real populist, where he could now point out, now that Trump has been in office for 4 years, that he was fake, that he was a fake populist, whereas he would be the real populist to Donald Trump's.
Yeah, Michael, that's a great point. Thank you for your call.
I think Michael makes a really good point. I think we also have let establishment and media, they've done a really good job of taking some terms and making them dirty words.
Yeah.
Populist is one, socialist is one, communist is one, anti-imperialist is one. And I think we've done a pretty good job recently in taking back socialist. But yeah, I mean, you can't defend yourself if you can't call your thing what it is.
Yeah.
And I think we need to not let people take those words away from
call
us.
it things like racism, white supremacy are also like taboo things to talk about what's happening in this country.
Charged.
Merced, you're on the line here with Political Misfits. What's on your mind?
Political Misfits.
Yes, sir.
Merced Cali. How's it going, JT and all?
Going all right. What's going on, man?
Hey, so I had a couple questions, just three, okay? Does Sanders have, numbers-wise, a path to victory at this point? That's one. Two, what is the way forward once Joe Biden loses to Donald Trump for the movement? And number three, are they going to make you put that little logo underneath your YouTube channel like they do with Redacted Tonight?
Not in totality.
Merced,
no.
thank you for the call. Those are all great questions.
All right, so let's go for the third one first. For any show that is going through Sputnik, yes. For my regular channel, no. So it just kind of depends on whether it's a broadcast or whether it's just my regular show. As for the way forward, yes, Sanders does have a path forward. I mean, look, there are like 1,000 or more votes left. So consistent wins in the various
Delegates
states.
left, yeah.
Delegates left, right. So you may have a situation where there's a brokered convention as opposed to somebody just winning outright. But the chances of it winning outright, I think, were always somewhat difficult. But nevertheless, the answer is yes. There's always a path forward, especially with somebody like Joe Biden, who could, soil himself on stage on any random day. As for what happens...
Figuratively or literally?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, he probably has.
Both. Right, I would be shocked.
This is happening.
It's a hot take there. I like it.
As for the way forward after Joe Biden loses, that's interesting. And, that's... Look, after Clinton lost, there was this kind of shift. There was this loss of credibility within the context of the Democratic Party. And that loss of credibility, I mean, she lost 1,100 seats all throughout the United States, House, Senate, Supreme Court, all of it. And so with that loss of legitimacy, you had a rival campaign that tries to make this claim for, no, the Democratic Party needs to be re-ensouled, this notion that you're going to have or serve two masters, the rich versus the workers and everybody else. That's a folly. You're not going to get it both ways. You're going to have dollars or pitchforks. And for the longest time, we've only had dollars. So the question becomes, what happens to the Democratic Party if they lose again with Hillary Clinton 2.0 and a dumber version of Hillary Clinton, or let's say a dumb version, because I don't think Hillary Clinton's dumb.
I would let me my stab real quick at that same question. I appreciate you answering number 3 there, but I would answer number 2 that if you think the way forward is after Joe Biden loses to Donald Trump, I think we're asking the question way too late. I think if Joe Biden's your nominee, and if Joe Biden wins, we as the movement of whatever I think you meant by movement, we need to start talking now. I mean, it's like immediately. If it's Biden and Trump, then yeah, immediately after the convention. If Biden is the nominee, the movement really needs to start organizing and strategizing. Then they can't wait until November, January, or whatever. Because we're going to be in a lot of trouble when it comes to having political power. And it's also going to mean down ballot people are also going to start getting more favors from Biden, the Bloombergs, the billionaires of the world. And so the whole Senate and Congress will also stay static. I'll say with Sanders, what he can do, I think he needs to, it's about momentum at this point right now. And obviously Joe Biden has the momentum. And this is what I was saying earlier. The best chance for Sanders right now, and I think some things stack up well for him. The next Super Tuesday is Tuesday of next week. It's right around the corner. That is going to include Idaho, Mississippi, Missouri, Michigan, Washington, and North Dakota. So he's going to lose Mississippi badly. But this is where it sounds a lot better for him. It's a coin flip basically there in Michigan and Missouri. He lost to Clinton in Missouri by a half a point. He beat Clinton in Michigan by a half a point. So that's good news for him. These are 2 big states that he's going to have to fight and figure out how to win them outright. But then he also has Idaho, Washington, North Dakota, 3 states he won by a lot the last time around in 2016. So 5 out of those 6 are well in play for him. And then the next day, he has a debate with Joe Biden. So if he can do well next Tuesday, that's March 10th. March 15th is the next debate. So if he does well next Tuesday and then can go to the debate and have kind of a 1-2, I captured some of the vote momentum, and then has a good debate performance. Elizabeth Warren knocked Bloomberg on his back and out of this race because of a good debate performance. Yeah. I could see the same thing happening for Sanders. That's his best bet right now. He's got to shift the momentum more than anything else, and that will come maybe next Tuesday and at that debate.
Agreed.
After that.
Michelle.
Well, I had a question for you. Did Warren knock Bloomberg out of the debate, or did Bloomberg come in, do exactly what he was always going to do, and then step out when we all knew he was going to?
No, because if he would have just had a milquetoast, blah, blah, blah kind of debate, Sanders is this, and everybody kind of took cheap shots at him, I already apologized for it. The way in which she cut him open with that opening on the NDAs, and the next day he had to release 3 women from the NDAs. All of the other people started writing articles about the sexual comments that were coming out well before that. And so maybe that would have added up and put pressure on him, but spotlight, national attention, just to embarrass him in front of an audience full of establishment Democrat folks next to people that are also taking money from Bloomberg, just embarrassed the hell out of the guy.
Yeah, that was rough.
No, I mean it was a wonderful debate.
Oh yeah, it was a beautiful attack.
Enjoyed it a whole lot.
It was like
but just the idea that Bloomberg would stay in the race to take votes away from Joe Biden, I don't think.
Well, see, I took it as
Bloomberg was in the race to win the race.
I took it as he was in the race to stop Sanders. Now, because if you remember, Bloomberg gave Joe Biden a 4-state running start.
Yeah.
With the notion that if Joe Biden does well, I don't have to get involved. The moment that it looked like Joe Biden couldn't carry the burden and everybody was like, Joe Biden's going to lose, Joe Biden's going to lose, Joe Biden's going to lose, Bloomberg gets in. And Ratner, the person who's backing Bloomberg, came out and said he could be part of the Stop Sanders coalition. They were very clear in regards to why Bloomberg was in the race.
Yeah, and endorsed him today. Scotty, you're on the line here with Political Misfits. Thank you for calling.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, Jamal.
What's going on?
For the past few, I've been watching you for the past few years, and I remember talking to you about the ADOS thing. I think it was last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to say, as far as like everybody talking about how Sanders could have reached out better to the black community. I mean, that's partly true, but it's avoiding the elephant in the room, which is the decades-old propaganda that the black communities had to deal with in terms of progressive politics, also being lied to over the years. Because if that were true, Tom Steyer and Elizabeth Warren, they had quote-unquote black agendas, specifically the black people, and they didn't do that very well with the black community. He's actually done well with black younger voters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, among younger voters, Sanders was winning, 58? Like, it's obscenely high. It's like, So between 18 to 29, Sanders is taking 48 to Biden 17. Between 30 to 44, Sanders is taking 41 to 23. And yeah, the issue or the divide seems to be along age.
So let me ask you this then, Scotty. This is from The Nation. Came out here, I think, today from Ellie Mistel from a couple days ago. She writes, Black voters didn't vote for Biden in South Carolina because they lack information. Black voters opted for Biden because they have no faith that white voters will do the right thing and vote for a true progressive.
I've heard that too.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I've heard that. I've heard that too. But it's just like, and I'll go and say this too. Another thing is Obama. Obama has ruined black politics for a very long time. Glenn Ford has said this. When Obama came into office, we even seen things where he talks about a poll where black voters were more supportive of an airstrike, I think, in Syria than white voters were. Now, it was a minority of voters. It was 36%, but that's still...
Glenn Ford's point was that basically that wasn't common. Like African Americans typically were more to the left in regards to like foreign policy and war and those type of things for obvious reasons, And when Obama got in office, this identity politics thing where they identified with him, well, it's a black hand that's now firing the drones that are murdering people, so we're okay with that. You know what I mean? That's where Glenn Ford was coming with that. And look, I've even had conversations. I think it was at the Unity thing. They were trying to draft Sanders. This was back in 2015 where they were trying to get him to run third party. And I remember having a really good conversation with a guy that made the argument, the black vote, Sanders saying blacks weren't ready for a black president. Now, his reasoning had to do with the attacks that were on Obama and the inability for African Americans to criticize Obama, like legitimately criticize him. I mean, how do you give 95% of the income to the top 1%? And you call yourself hope and change. You know what I mean? And the inability to criticize him as he was doing those things, because that was understood back in like 2013, 2014. But because of the way Republicans were going after him, it was almost an inability to actually criticize him. I don't buy the argument that blacks weren't ready for a black president. I mean, any situation where you're going to get somebody new and there was going to be kind of trying to feel your way and you have your own perceptions of what the America is and what America would allow you to be as a particular president. So all that's fair. And I even give credibility to this notion that there are a lot of people who thought Joe Biden was the only person who could be sold, meaning who keeps the monsters at bay. Basically, who can we sell to the American public that would allow them to vote for this person as opposed to putting the Republican in office? And look, I've had family members that makes that argument. Like, Joe Biden is the only person. Joe Biden is the only person.
Yep. Scotty, thank you for calling in. Well, let's get one last caller here on the line. Alex, thank you for calling in. You got about 30 seconds with us.
All right. So I was just going to kind of point at, I guess I get a little frustrated during election season because I pay attention to politics all the time. So I'm just wondering how we do something to bring more people into the fold all the time. There's this, we kind of let them control when we care about politics and when we don't. We see all these fair weather kind of political pundits come out and people become really passionate and then it sort of dies away. And I think it kind of speaks to sort of our political education, just focusing so heavily on what politicians have done and not what people do on a regular basis, how they move even people like Richard Nixon to pass progressive legislation when the pressure's there.
Yeah.
How do we keep that pressure? And doesn't it make sense for Bernie, if he loses, why stick with the Democrats? Why not build something that's really something socialists actually do, which is organizing people outside of bourgeois elections, which, he's more of a social democrat. So I just really, how do we focus this kind of energy that pops up during elections into something more meaningful and more lasting?
Yeah, Alex, that's a great point. Thank you for calling in.
If you do things that get people energized because of it's benefiting their material needs, those people will back you. Now, the catch here is you've had 40, 50 years, but that wasn't the case. That candidates just took cash, they'd nibble around the edges, and you had a lot of people who were disenchanted with the political spectrum because, and again, I've talked to many of these people, it doesn't matter who I support. It doesn't matter who I vote for because nothing really changes. It means, there's this kind of deterioration in people's perception of what can be done in the political space.
Yeah, I think it comes down to organizing all year, every day, no matter when the election season is. Another good way to stay educated. Listen to Political Misfits every day from 12 to 2 o'clock. And a lot of it, we talked about it yesterday, the lack of arts education is paired with the lack of civic education in young elementary, grade school, and all of that. And that's really despairing to me. Well, that was a full show, to say the least. We're going to talk tomorrow. I want to talk more about whether or not Tulsi Gabbard will be let in the next March 15th debate. When they rewrote the rules the last time, they said anybody with a delegate would be allowed in the debate. Will Tulsi Gabbard be in the March 15th debate?
That's going to change.
Other questions we'll get to tomorrow. Thank you for calling in, Teresa Lundy, Ashton P. Woods, and Bill Honeyman.
There are a few comments that I want to get to. We have like 20 seconds. Sharpshooter, Super Tuesday. I'm still rooting for Bernie Sanders. Cindy Leffer for Germany. Darren, Obama is doing the Blair. And Aisha, good job, Michelle.
Thank you. Political Misfits, live in Washington, D.C. We'll see you tomorrow. Now get back to organizing.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.